What up? It's your man Trey Hustles back again with another video. This time we're going to be talking about what to do before you spend $1 on a restaurant. So I would say spending money too early kills businesses. Reason being is because when you first start out, you need to track and you need to calculate your expenses first. Just jumping in and saying, "Oh, I'm going to build a restaurant," or "I'm going to um, start a clothing store." If you just jump in and go lease a building and start buying stuff, you're probably setting yourself up for a hard time. Reason being is without a plan, you're planning to fail. I know you've heard that before. So, what I would say is plan out everything. Uh, Start looking at spaces, develop a budget, determine a budget for every little spend before you actually start spending. Um, Before me and my wife opened up our first business, we uh, calculated what it was going to cost. We knew how much we were looking to spend on rent. We had an idea of what things were going to cost. We went and shopped everything and wrote things down, determined what we needed, what we didn't need. Um, you're still probably going to end up buying some things that you don't need, but it's better to have a list and try to stick to that list. And if an unexpected expense comes up, then I would analyze that and then move on from there. Um, so, talking about restaurants, I would say most restaurants tend to fail before they even open. Reason being is because most people start a food business because they get an idea, or they think they have a great recipe, or they have a great dish, and they say, "Okay, I'm going to start a restaurant." I would say that about 80 to 90% of the food in restaurants is probably not as good as what you're going to cook at home. Um, the reason being is a lot of people, I think, in the restaurant industry, they just kind of uh, go to a food market or get a distributor and they pick out items um, that are mostly prepackaged and things of that nature. I would recommend to um, have a smaller menu. On the restaurant side, I would say a smaller menu or specialize in a certain type of food or even item. That's kind of been the trend lately. If you look around, is sticking to like one segment of food. Um, so definitely, do your research. You know, there's some really really competitive markets out there, like burgers and pizza and chicken has gotten really really competitive, but you can still get out there and make a whole bunch of money if you know cross your T's and dot your I's. Since I'm a restaurant owner and I'm speaking from experience, I've seen a lot of people overspend even without thinking about anything down the line, uh, whether they're going to have an employees or whether they're going to just work it as a job. I've seen people underspend on things that they should probably go ahead and get the right system in place from the jump. Um, you know so being cheap isn't the way either. So I would say definitely, like I said before, calculate what you're going to spend, and try to stick to it. You know what I'm saying? If you see something that you think is going to be better for you, go ahead and try it out. I always say, to anybody who's in business, anything that can be changed quickly or easily, go ahead and try it out, because you can always change it if it's not something that is propping up the whole business. um I would also want to make a point to say to define the business, not just the idea. Don't just you know a lot of the time in business I have found that you know I was thinking I was doing one thing, my aim was to do one thing, but then I always ended up kind of like pivoting and seeing the money in another area of the business and then attacking that. So always, sit down, calculate your cost on your products, or your service, how much it really costs, how much it really is going to cost to make an income. Because 9 times out of 10, when you start a business, you're going to be the sole person in that business. If you start a cleaning business, you and your significant other or um, friends or something like that's going to be the ones that's going to be doing majority of the business, just because you're not going to probably have resources or budget to have staff initially. So always define, how much profit and things are going to take to operate, how much profit you expect to make off the rip, so that that, when you start the business, you're going to be looking at making X amount of dollars off of X amount of sales. Know your role. You want to always know your role, whether you're an operator, the manager, or just an investor in the business, because a lot of people think, oh, like I always get people that say, hey, I like your business, I'll invest. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But here's the thing, you want to invest in the systems and the things that I've learned the hard way, right? So they think that, oh, if I get in with him now on the ground floor, that they're going to make a whole bunch of money. But in real life, investors make you know meager returns on their money. Um, so investors, generally it depends on how much skin in the game they have. Um, you know, a manager, usually you're going to end up being the manager of your business before, while you're operating it as well. So, most people are going to be the operator, the manager, and the investor initially. Um, but definitely know your role, define your role, write them out, and you know, make sure that it's clearly defined. Especially if you're starting a business with a partner or with your significant other. Make sure that you know your role and what you're handling, and they know their role and what they are supposed to handle. So then that way, there's no issue as far as accountability when things don't get done or things don't come outcomes don't materialize. um, Plan survival cash, not startup cash. I would definitely say, have, if you're renting space for your business, have a month of rent on top. Um, have a little emergency fund, because things don't 90% of the time things don't go your way when you start a business. You might think, oh, we're going to get out here, we're going to sell, you know 20,000 the first month. You might sell 5,000 your first month, and you was planning on that 20,000, and you was planning on making, whatever percentage, 20%, 30%, or whatever. You was thinking you was gonna have that free cash flow, but now you don't. So make sure that you have a little bit of money as a backup. I would say, like, if you have, for instance, let's say 10 grand. Most of my businesses I started for around 10 to 20 grand, right? So let's say if you have 10 grand to start this business, and let's say initial startup, just getting the wheels turning is going to cost you 6. The other 4 grand needs to be sitting, waiting in the cut to be brought in, to catch you if you fall. Because usually day one, when you open a business, the sales are going to be really, really low, especially in a restaurant business. um, Unless you can get some, you know if you can get some marketing and you can get some advertisement going beforehand, which I would definitely recommend. um, Join the local Facebook groups. Um, and that's something that I'll make another video on. Way things that you can do to get some publicity and possibly, have a line out down the street when you first open your place. Um, a lot of common beginner mistakes are going into a space and trying to fully complete, the design, um, on a limited budget. Um, what I tend to do is go in with a minimalist, uh, thought process as far as build outs. I try to do the minimum first, and then I like to gradually build out and have a plan of what I'm going to do month 2, month 6, maybe a year down the line. Um, your business needs to start and then it needs to grow. So, just because you don't have all your display cases or you don't have all the art or whatnot that you want in your place, that doesn't mean that you can't start. I always tell people when you're starting a business, it's a start. So you're not always going to start off with everything. You know what I'm saying? When I started off in the resale business, I didn't have Supreme fridges. I didn't have, you know, 10-year-old Grail sneakers, in my inventory. I started off buying used shoes and cleaning them and reselling them. And I started off in the vintage business by going to the Ark and the Goodwill. Now I have, suppliers that I can hit up and say, hey, I just want a bale of North Face jackets in this size range, and they'll send me those. So how you start is never going to be the apex of the business. Um, Another thing I see a lot of is overspending on aesthetics. Um, you know, having all kind of comforts around, um, aesthetics, trying to make it look bigger than it is. It doesn't matter, man. If you have the product or the service that people want, they're going to come and spend that dollar with you. So don't go broke trying to, uh, impress everybody and make the space look more than, what you need in the beginning to start the business. You know what I'm saying? Always remember, this is start. This is day one. Day one, it looked like this. Down the line, you're going to have pictures and you're going to show how you built the business. You're going to be able to show people, like, I started with this. You might have started with this truck. Now you got this truck. So the guy you see with the F350 and it's all souped up or whatever, landscapers or whatever. I got a couple friends in the landscape business and they always started with a raggedy truck. They always have, they might got 5 trucks now, but the raggedy is one. That's the one they started with. So definitely, don't overspend on aesthetics. Another common beginner mistake is underestimating your labor and your cash flow needs. Um, in the beginning of your business, I would try to start a business that you can run initially by yourself. So I will put it like this: say, like, right now you have a job. If you're just working, a regular 9 to 5, then I would try to start a business to where I could do the business outside of my job. So, you work full time for someone, you should always work part time for your own thing. And that's what I tell all my employees, anybody who's ever worked for me. I always ask them, like, what's your thing? What's your dream, to have your own business if you have that dream. And they always tell me, and I say, when you get off your shift, working for me, you should go home and write a plan out to where you could start that little side business and maybe work on it 2 to 4 hours additionally, or work on it on your days off from here. So I would say definitely, don't underestimate your cash flow needs, and don't underestimate how much labor is going to cost, because there's going to be unexpected things like workman's comp insurance. Actually, I'll tell you a story. I had started my restaurant. Well, actually, it goes back to further. It goes back to when I had my sneaker shops, and I didn't know I was supposed to have workman's comp insurance. I thought that was for like landscaping and construction and stuff like that. So I had got a letter one day, and they said, "Well, we estimate that you owe us, X amount of dollars because you don't. We can see you don't have workman's comp insurance. So you need to prove to us that when you got the policy, and then you need to pay this fine or whatever, right? But they ended up giving me a really really cheap break on it because I didn't know that I needed the workman's comp for my industry. So I think I ended up paying like maybe like 20% of whatever the fines were or something like that. They were really cool. I even made payments on it. Um, but yeah, there's going to be taxes. There's going to be, depending on your area, I would talk to someone that's in business or even go to your local authority, and just ask them, like, if I hire people, what are the things that I need? And they usually have like a piece of paper with a little checklist that'll help you. And it'll be on the website too. And you can just print that off and put that like in your little folder or whatnot. Um, I would I would definitely say, like, with your cash flow needs, always account for the unexpected, because the unexpected is going to come. Because when you think that everything's going to go smoothly, you're going to be going down your little checklist of stuff that you need to get done to get the business open. You're going to run into problems. You're always going to run into problems, especially with these commercial spaces. There's always something that they don't want to fix, or that the last person, left in bad condition. And the landlords, they're trying to make a buck too, so they're trying not to fix nothing. So, if they're going to be on the hook for anything, you better make sure it's in your lease. Um, I would say delay spending until clarity is achieved. So when you get, you know, to the point where, you kind of understand the gist of running your business, then, I wouldn't plan on taking too much money, money out for, I wouldn't plan on taking too much money out in the beginning stages of the business for, personal expenses. I would definitely keep the job at least part time, especially if your business starts to do a little do kind of good. Keep the job anyway, just for a little bit. Let's say you're making 5 grand at your job. Until your business starts to make 5 grand that you can pay yourself, which means that you're going to probably be doing like multiple times that in revenue, you know. So if you think about it, right, most businesses are going to, I'm going to estimate, you can look up the stats if you want, but I'm going to estimate most businesses, restaurants, I'm going to say probably the average restaurant is probably making about 7% of profit. 7 to maybe 15% profit. 15 is actually a pretty good profit margin on a restaurant if you're doing some basic things. Um, but I would definitely delay like spending a lot of money. Don't go out and just, you know, go get a car on a write off just because you can now, because you have an EIN or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Listening to these so called business gurus. Um, I would definitely, keep the car I have. Don't upgrade anything until you're fully sure that the business is going to keep running. And, definitely get away to keep track of your sales, keep track of what you're paying in taxes, keep track of everything. Because a lot of people start a business, even myself, I've started a businesses and not kept good records. And then you have to pay an accountant 7,000 to go dig through all your crummy records and your receipts and crap that you stuffed everywhere, and you're digging and you're running around trying to find all this stuff. Trust me, it ain't worth it. Get you a binder, a folder, and just shove everything in there, or get app like QuickBooks where you can just take pictures of everything and it loads it there and it's all there. So then when you go to an accountant, the fees are low. Like my taxes now are going to be, you know, a few $1,000s now, because everything's neat, everything's packaged. I have a bookkeeper every month that gives me a P&L. So then when I go to the accountant, they just they go off the P&Ls and do the taxes. Um, Another thing I would say is focus on survival and simplicity at first. Okay, so what that means is act like your business isn't going to be successful for at least a year. Um, Most businesses fail in the restaurant business. I think the failure rate is like most, like 80, maybe 90% of restaurants. They don't make it to 3 years. My restaurant is in year 4 right now. We've had some turbulent months, especially lately with the economy dipping. A lot of restaurants have closed. I've seen a lot of big restaurant groups close all of their restaurants. So it can be really, really hard. They can be really, really thin margins. But if you do a lot of things right, if you do most things correctly, you can make a good buck owning a restaurant. Um, it's just about locking down systems and just taking action and ownership and really like bringing something to the market that people like. If people like your food and they like your service and they like your concept, then they'll come back and back, and that's where you're going to make the real money is off the repeat customers. Um, of course, other things matter like location, social media, very important, but we'll get to those things. Um, like I said before, I'm working on the restaurant starter playbook. Um, you know, it's going to be a resource for you to, kind of have a game plan to starting a restaurant. I might adapt a version for other businesses, such as, some of the other businesses that I'm in are, reselling, online reselling. I've closed my retail shops because I just don't like the moving parts of retail, uh, retail brick and mortar setup. I think the online is way more efficient. It could be a lot more profitable for my situation. But yeah, look out for that playbook, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.